Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the WEST webinar, Everyone is a Leader. My name is Wei Haslim, Senior Director of University Engagement at WEST. You will hear shortly from our speaker, Dan Corcoran. Dan earned his Bachelor of Science in Informatics from WEST in 2014. He was a student speaker for the WEST commencement in that year. Dan is currently working for IBM Security. He manages several software platforms for the top accounts in the Mid-Atlantic. Prior to joining IBM, Dan held several leadership positions with a $20 billion national food distributor. His role included re-engineering the entire IT support function for the distribution centers and process improvement for the corporate offices support. Dan has over 28 years of experience in information technology and leadership. He resides in Northern Virginia with his wife and 3 children. Also, you will notice Dorothea Terry, WEST Learning Facilitator, on your discussion box, who will assist us during this online presentation. Thank you, Dorothea. Without further ado, I would like to pass along this webinar to Dan Corcoran. Thank you, Dan.
All right, thank you, and welcome everybody. And before we get started, I want to kind of go through a couple of things on how we'll go ahead and run today's session. One, when we go through some of this material, some of it may be new for you, some of it may not, but it's okay if you need an extra pass at it. That's okay. It took me a couple of years to figure this stuff out. The other thing is when we get ready to do questions, I'd ask that you hold them till the end and try to remember which slide we were on, and we'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. I'm hoping we'll have a good 15, 20 minutes worth of time at the end here for questions and answers. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I would ask that if I'm going too fast, just somebody let me know down in the chat that I need to slow down a little bit, and we'll go from there. All right. So again, I'm Dan Corcoran, and I'm going to give you a little bit more on my background and why I have this philosophy of why everyone is a leader. So feel free to go and link up with me on LinkedIn. But here's why I think everybody is a leader. So when it comes down to it, just purely from getting things done, sometimes you just have to kind of run with it yourself. And your job may not be manager, your job may not be, director, your job may not have any title whatsoever. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you're passionate about what you're doing, you're trying to help others succeed, and in turn, you will succeed farther than you ever thought. In my career, the more I chased a title and the more I chased, quite honestly, the money, the less I found it. What I found was if I focused on the work and I focused on setting that right example and being that leader, quite honestly, without a title, and that's a good book to look up, Leader Without a Title, I was happier at work, which made me more productive at work, which, believe it or not, got me more notice. And then I started working at home. What do you do? How do you find these things? So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I've been working in various roles for quite a long time. Started a long time ago in a company as a clerk checking in drivers, and just kind of looked around and said, hey, you know what? I think we can do a better job, and here's how I think we can do it. So I worked with a team there, and sure enough, they implemented those changes, saved the company a lot of money. The next time there was an opportunity to do something, they look to see who those people are that are putting themselves out there and trying to take a more active role. And that's really what this is about, is how do you take a more active role in the people around you and quite honestly in your own life. All right, so let's get rolling here. So on our agenda, so why you? We're going to go over reasons, some of what I just told you, what I think a leader is, and then what some experts think a leader is, how you can make a difference. One of the key things that I learned, it's not the only one, but it's just one key area that I studied in, was around situational leadership. And when you start to understand situational leadership, the way you work with people and the way they work with you becomes entirely different. And from my perspective, it comes infinitely better. Okay, so we've gone over these things and we've done a little example of what situational leadership is. Now what? And then of course, how can you learn more? And then, as I stated earlier, we're going to get into questions and answers, and hopefully I'll have some answers for you. But I'm by no means an expert at any of this. Every day I get up and I try to learn something new, and hopefully everyone out there today will be able to do that as well. All right, so let's move on here to our first slide here. Why you? Well, there's that old question of, well, why not you, right? It's real simple. You're working with others. You have an opinion on how the work should be done. Doesn't mean your opinion's right, doesn't mean it's wrong, but you have an opinion. Most likely, if you've been in your job for longer than 90 days, you've got an understanding of the work. And the biggest one that I think why you is that everyone needs help. So can you be that one that helps people and gets them to where they need to be? Can you be the one that receives help without without anything in return expected, right? So it's kind of neat in that the more you help others, the more they seem to want to help you, and it definitely works out to your advantage. All right, so what is a leader? Okay, so Google it. There's 870 million whatever results. Big deal. My definition is pretty simple, right? You got to ask yourself: is a leader, is it a title or is it a way of life? And I think it's a way of life. And for the longest time, I thought it was a title, and I was wrong. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can be a manager. And yeah, you're going to get stuff done. So yeah, managers get results, but they're going to get them once. And we're going to have some stories here in a minute, and it'll hopefully become a little bit more clear on what I mean by that. My opinion is that leaders get people motivated to be successful forever. And what you have to think about is it my responsibility ultimately for whatever the work is that's trying to get done? Maybe it's not. Maybe it is your manager's responsibility. But can you help them? Can you help them beyond what your responsibilities are? Can you see somebody else that may be struggling and offer them a helping hand and help them? If you're doing that, you're leading. The other thing is the things that you can control. When you have a project, even if it's a project maybe you're not that excited about, do you stay motivated? Do you do things to make sure that you're putting yourself out there, putting your best foot forward? And more importantly than any of this is, are you motivating others? Are you getting other people excited about the work, or at least getting them to tolerate the work, even if it's something they may not be into entirely? It really does help to make sure that you are that person that gets in, gets it done, listens to folks, helps make the decisions, and really works together with management, your peers, other teams, and really by doing that, you're going to start to motivate other folks. So moving on to our next thing here, it really comes down to, okay, so how can you make a difference? Well, you have to understand, you have to have an understanding of what the end result is, right? So a lot of times what we find ourselves doing is, the boss will say, hey, I need you to go and take these, 10, boxes of rocks and carry them across the field and drop them off over here by this, tree. Well, it's okay to ask a question, to say, hey, okay, what are we going to do once the boxes are over there, right? And there's some bosses that are going to be like, well, just do it. That's a manager. They just want you to get the task done. If you start talking to somebody and say, well, so what's the end game here on this, right? Hopefully they'll spend the time and share it with you. And that'll be a good example for you to follow. Likewise, when somebody asks you something, how do you respond? Do you say to them, I don't know, just do it? Or do you say, you know what? Maybe I don't know. Let's think about this. Why are we doing this? Right? And then, how do you fit into the big picture? How do the people around you fit into the big picture? And then do you add or subtract from the outcome? Are you the the person that's kind of dragging the team down, or are you the person that's, getting in there and doing what you need to do and taking those opportunities to maybe do a little bit extra? That's really, part of leading and showing that you are getting in there, you're getting the work done, you're interested in the whys to get the work done because, quite honestly, you want to learn more about it. Now, maybe you're not going to learn the most in the world about how to move a box of rocks across a field, but you get the idea. You want to understand why the work is being done, and you want to make sure that you can express that to people and help them understand it as well. So then the other part of leading is getting out of your comfort zone, and making a difference here. So, um, is it easy for you, right? So, for instance, I've been in IT for a lot of years. If somebody came up to me and asked me to do something in IT, whether I knew how to do exactly what it was they asked or not, I'd feel pretty comfortable that I could pull it off. Now, if somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I need you to go through here and do a complete income tax analysis on this person," I would struggle. I'm not that great with understanding all of the ins and outs of the tax code of the United States, so it's going to take me a little bit of extra effort to figure that out, and that's going to put me out of my comfort zone. So what am I going to do with that? Am I going to shy away from it and try and find a way to not have to do it, or am I going to embrace it and go after it and try to find out as much as I can about it and be as engaged and involved as I possibly can? Even if it just impacts you, that's still showing leadership. Even if it's for your own personal gain, you're still making those extra steps and you're trying to understand the hows and whys. So it really is important to make sure that you understand your comfort zone. And then what is your comfort zone in relationship to somebody else, right? So I would imagine that there are people on this webinar right now that if I were to ask you to assemble from scratch a personal computer, you could knock it out pretty quickly. And I would imagine that quite honestly, I think I could too. I haven't built one in a few years, but used to build them all the time. I'm pretty confident there are people here that if I asked you that same task, you would be extremely nervous. You would have a lot of questions. You wouldn't understand why it is that we asked you to do this. And those are the kind of things that, get you out of your comfort zone. Now you have to get into that mode of, let me ask why. Let me find out what the end game is here, right? And we'll get more into how to manage comfort zones for yourself and for others. All right, so if you think about this, the methodology, so we're going to go ahead and get this link and put it into the chat box down there so everybody has it. And I would encourage you to save this link for later. You don't need to go there now. But the methodology I want to talk about is situational leadership. Right? So what that is it's probably one of the most recognized, utilized, and effective ways to influence people, and it's been around since the 60s. And when you think about some of the things I'm getting ready to talk to you about here, when you really start thinking about these things, it really does make sense, and it really does add a whole level of clarity into the work you're trying to accomplish, and quite honestly, the work others are trying to get you to accomplish, right? So Dr. Paul Hersey, a quote he has is, "A situational leader is anybody anywhere who recognizes that influencing behavior is not an event, but a process." And it really is a process. So let's talk a little bit about this process. All right, so while we're going into this process here, I'm going to go into this sample application here in just a minute for you. So be thinking about that while I finish this up here. So situational leadership model, right? Really, what it comes down to is this: is every task is different for every person. You can take two IT people and ask them to do a task, and it will be different based upon their particular skill level. If I were to take a programmer and tell them to change out a piece of hardware, they might not have such a good time doing it. And likewise, if I got a hardware person and told them to go write a program, they'd probably struggle a little bit. They're both IT. They're both pretty smart folks, but they have different understandings and they have different awareness of the task at hand, right? So how do you manage that? Well, you have to ask yourself, what amount of guidance and direction is it going to take for me to lead this person through this task, right? What is it that I'm going to have to do from an emotional standpoint, right? Because if somebody's antsy about something, they're going to be a little bit less receptive. Whereas if somebody's done it their whole life, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I got this, right? And your involvement's going to be less. So the situation changes for every single person and for every interaction about getting the work accomplished, right? So when you start focusing on situational leadership, you really get into things like first you have to diagnose, okay, what is the task? What is the level of commitment that I have to put into it? And where is that person when it comes down to getting the work done? What are they understanding about the work? What is their comfort level? Have they done it before? Those types of things. And then you've got to adapt because you may find that, they thought they were at a particular level and maybe they weren't, right? Um, there are things that are going to change as you do the work. So it's not like, okay, this task needs to be done. These are the people. I've made all of the diagnosis. It is carved in stone. Nah, you're going to have some things where you're going to have to, kind of fly by the seat of your pants a little bit and figure them out as they go along because things change. Um, and then communicate. If you're not sure what someone's thinking, ask them. If they're not sure, be open and responsive to them asking you questions. Have open dialogue. Um, really work towards, with your coworkers, with your management, even with, I've used this at home with my kids. Um, you know, how do you have that conversation if you're trying to get your kids to learn something and to understand something, but they're not there yet? How do you use this to kind of get to a place where you can now advance the conversation, right? So you've diagnosed it, you got to make some changes along the way, and you got to make sure you communicate so that everyone can understand and accept what it is you're trying to do. And then you got to advance the situation. Use all of those things together and work it out and get with folks and help them be successful, which in turn will help you be successful, right? Now, I'm going to tell you right now, this doesn't come without a little bit of extra blood, sweat, and tears, so to speak. When you start finding yourself getting engaged in situations to help folks out, it's going to require you to be a little bit more involved than maybe you have before. And you'll find that it's probably some of the best work you've done, that extra engagement, because you can actually see where you're helping somebody succeed. Um, so don't shy away from it, but also don't get yourself so involved that you end up, over engaged, right? So just a little caveat there. All right, so now let's talk about this from a sample application perspective. All right, so if I were to again ask, who knows how to format a hard disk? If I ask the IT person, not going to be that big of a deal, right? They're going to know that they're going to go in there and make sure that the drive is installed and make sure that the operating system's working and go in and do all the recognition in either Windows or Mac OS depending on what they have to do and all of the different caveats about that, right? So when they start doing this, they are going to have kind of a very advanced role here, and it's really going to become more of a thing where you're going to be delegating to that person to go and format that hard drive, right? So now when you start talking to somebody like your receptionist or a 5-year-old kid or even a senior citizen who has never seen a computer in their life, it's an entirely different conversation, right? So the IT person got it. Yep, got to go format a hard drive because they know what happens downstream. Oh, and by the way, after I format the hard drive, I'm going to do the operating system. I'm going to load the applications. Hey, what computer does it go in? So you really have more of a delegating and you're working with that person to just kind of explain, this is the end game, knock it out, right? when you come back to these other folks, this is more of a kind of a, I'm going to tell you how to do it. I'm going to train you how to do it, right? And in doing that, it really means that you are 100% engaged and involved in that process. This is not delegating or checking back later or any of that. You are hands in, you're getting dirty with them and getting it done. So then you got to ask yourself, is it worth the time, or should I just knock it out? And those are two really great questions to ask yourself. So is it worth the time? Well, it depends. So ask this, is this a skill that this person will have an opportunity to use beyond right now, ever in their life? Is this a skill that will help them to maybe grasp a larger, a larger concept, right? So is this kind of like a foundational thing that they need to understand so that they can grasp a larger concept? Um, and is this something that I'm going to need them to do again, right? So if the answer is yes, it's going to be something they will use on their own again, or they'll use it for the rest of their life, it is foundational, then yeah, it's worth your time. But it's going to take you some extra time. And quite honestly, you probably could have done it faster. But what you have to ask yourself is I've made this decision that I want to, start being more of a leader in my life in helping others and in helping things happen. Um, did I just take away an opportunity for somebody else to learn? And if I really think back on this, did somebody at some point spend that time with me to help me to learn? And what have I done with that knowledge that I gained? So it really comes down to that. Is it worth the time? Or should I just do it? Now, if it's something where I'm going to just format the hard drive and stick it in the machine and nobody on this list is ever going to have to worry about it ever again, just knock it out. Move on. Don't, the worst thing you want to do, what's that old thing, trying to teach a pig to sing, right? It's just going to frustrate the pig. Nothing's going to ever come of it, so don't worry about it. All right. So, going to go through a scenario here. And for those of you that are in Arizona, I'm sure you've seen at some point a pool like this before. For those of you that are someplace else, like myself on the East Coast, where we've been dealing with some cold weather and snow and rain and all of that nonsense, it's just kind of refreshing to look at. So, here is what we're going to talk about. And I cannot take credit for the story that I'm about to tell here. I don't know where it came from. I just know that it really proves my point for me. So, imagine that you are standing next to the pool and somebody calls your boss who is standing 10 feet away and says, "Hey, I need you to get that person into the pool." So we're going to say Dan. I need you to get Dan into the pool, right? You now have two options. You can walk over to where Dan is, and he's standing next to the pool, and you can knock him in. And Dan is in the pool. You have done your job, and you can call back your manager and say, Dan is in the pool, and walk away. You're done. Now, let's think about this. How's Dan feeling right about now about you? How's Dan feeling about maybe his job? How's Dan feeling about the fact that he now has to buy a new cell phone because it was in his pocket? There's just a myriad of things that went wrong here. Yeah, you did your job and you got Dan in the water. Good for you. So let's think about this a different way, right? Let's find out about the situation and what's going on. Let's take this from more of a leadership perspective and let's start thinking about how we can make some questions to Dan and communicate with him and make sure that he understands what it is we're trying to do. So I'm going to walk over and say, "Hey Dan, can you step away from the pool for a second?" Sure thing. Dan comes over and you say, "Hey Dan, listen, here's the deal. So I just got a call from management, and I really need you to get into the pool. So I thought it'd be best if you and I talked about it because I want to make sure of where you are as far as being into a pool. So I got some questions for you. Do you know how to, one of them is going to be, hey, do you know how to swim? Dan says, no. Well, in the back of my mind, I thought everybody knows how to swim. So now I've got to adapt. I've got to figure out what's going on here because Dan doesn't know how to swim, and I almost knocked him into 10 feet of water. So what could have happened there? What could have been the ramifications there? So I was like, oh, that's okay, Dan. Here's what we're going to do. You and we're going to work through this, and we're going to get you in that water. But here's how we're going to go about it. I'm going to point you down here to the far end, and I want you to notice that the water's only about 6 inches deep down there. There's a step. So are you comfortable around water? You good with water, or you just don't know how to swim? Comfortable, just doesn't know how to swim. All right, well, here's the deal. We're going to go down to the far end, and you and I together, we're going to work through this. We're going to get in the water. We're going to go through. We're going to go the first step, the second step, and we're going to stop. And we're going to do a little quick process check, make sure everything's okay. And then after that, we're going to work towards getting all the way into the water. And then once I've got you all the way into the water, I'm going to kind of step away a little bit, but I'll be nearby, and you can go ahead in. So Dan and the manager, they go down, they step in the pool. They get in there, they start walking in the water, and the boss stops Dan and says, Dan, stop right there. There's one thing I want to make sure you understand. The way you're feeling right now from your knees down is very cold. I get that. It's because you just got into the water. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to adapt, and your body's going to start to feel the temperature of the water, and you're going to get in there. And after the initial shock of maybe 30 seconds or a minute, it's really going to start to feel refreshing. And then you're going to want to go ahead to continue in all the way up to your neck. And quite honestly, that's all you have to do because they asked me to get you into the water, and by then you'll be in. And then if you want to hang out for a little bit there, great. If not, we'll get out and we'll move along. So Dan now understands more. You get him in there. He gets all the way in, all the way up to his neck. He's in the water. You're stepping away from him a little bit. All right, you good, Dan? Yep. Okay, are you sure? Because if you keep going, it's going to get deeper, and I don't want you to go any farther than you have to because this is your first attempt at this. It's like, yep, I got it. Sure enough, Dan's happy, loves the water, doesn't want to come out. Well, he's got to. He comes out of the water, dries off, goes on his merry way. So let's talk about this situation here. How's Dan feeling now? Right? I'm pretty sure that Dan was able to take the time to go and put on a bathing suit because he had the opportunity to know what the wheres and what's in the whys were. I'm sure he got his cell phone out of the way. He went and got in the water. He knew what was going to happen. He understood all of the aspects of it. And it was all said and done. It was actually a pretty positive experience for Dan. So now let's think about Dan's boss that could have just threw him into the water. How much extra time did he or she have to spend to go out there to get Dan involved and get Dan engaged to get into the water? So I'm going to ask you, was it worth it? Was the time worth it? Or should he have just gone up and knocked the guy in? Well, here's the deal, right? Let's look at these outcomes a little bit. So method one, pushed him in. Job done, less happy. What's Dan going to do the next time he sees the boss? He's not going to be anywhere near the water. He's going to actually avoid this person. Will he ever want to work with him again? No. Because he's always going to remember that the total disregard for him, his position, his understanding, and the fact that you just knocked the guy in so you could get your job done. Right? So now let's look at method two. Approach Dan, share, and share the desired outcome. The job still got done. Dan understands what, where, why, and how. You have a better understanding of Dan's comfort level in the water. And the next time it's going to be easier. Well, wait a second. What do you mean by the next time it's going to be easier? So here's what's going to happen. Dan now has a trust with you because you adapted to the situation. And the next time the boss says, hey, you need to get Dan in the water, or you need to get somebody to go in there and do whatever, now you're going to be able to go to Dan and say, hey, remember when you and I worked together, we had to go get in the water? Yeah, I remember that. I need you to do that again, but I'm not going to be able to be there for you to help you in. Are you comfortable with that? Are you okay with that? Dan's going to be like, yeah, I got it. It's like, okay, little small difference. What I need you to do is once you get in, I don't need you to go all the way up to your neck. I want you to go about waist deep. And if you look over to the right, I need you to get there's a thing in the bottom of the pool that you need to bring back for us. Can you pull that off? Sure thing. Now you've built rapport, and you've given Dan an opportunity to grow, and more importantly, you have led Dan to a desired outcome, and you have improved Dan's confidence, which is going to help you downstream because you spent the extra time and the extra efforts to get Dan to where he wants to really go and perform again because he trusts and he now understands why the work needs to be done. So that's part of being a leader, whether it's in your title or not, is being able to take that extra time, that extra effort, and work with folks and get them to where they understand why you're doing what you're doing, and more importantly, get them inspired and get them comfortable with doing it on their own with less involvement from you. So the more people that you get from that stage of where you had to direct them totally to where that situation was earlier where the IT guy, where you just basically, hey, I need you to go format a hard drive, and they run with it, the easier it becomes for you in both your peer structure, if you are a manager of people of some sort, you'll find an incredible difference in the way your folks start to work for you to help you succeed as well, as opposed to just doing what they need to do to get by and get out. All right, so let's look at some real world examples here, right? This happened in my career, and this is how situational leadership really helped me. So one of the situations I got myself into is I had to redo the service offering at one of my employers. And there were 170 plus people involved, and we had to come up with a way to be more efficient, which means everybody had an opinion, and it would have been very easy for me to just do the quick and dirty to say, hey, you know what, I've been doing this game for a long time. This is how we're going to do it, and that's it. And I would have gotten the work done, but it would have been ugly, and it would have not worked out very well. So we ended up having 94 people involved. And what we did is we let folks decide in their own locations who they wanted to represent them, right? So we gave them a little bit of power to figure it out on their own. In some places there was only one IT person. We let them, they had to do it themselves. So we listened, we learned, we asked questions, we showed folks what we thought would work, and more importantly, we got out of this us versus them or me versus you mentality, right? And we eliminated the noise. And here's what I mean by eliminating the noise, right? So I have this this thing that I like to call the $100 person. And no matter what you're doing, when you get in there and you start working with folks, there's going to be some people that you just can't make happy, right? I call them $100 people, and here's what I mean. If somebody were to walk into your office or your, place of work and hand you a $100 bill, no strings attached, the majority of folks would say, wow, that's incredible, thanks. What is this for? Oh, it's just because I had an extra $100 and I thought you could use it. No strings attached, enjoy it. And you'd be touched, I would think. You'd be like, wow, that's pretty generous, Well, some people might say, no, I can't take this, and they give it back. That's fine. Whatever your reaction there from a positive perspective. Now, what I mean by $100 person is then there's the other side of the story. And those are the people that you can never make happy no matter what. So you really just eliminate the noise by letting them vent and move on. And here's what a $100 person is. Same deal. I come in and I say, here's $100. They don't ask me why. They don't ask me, what they did to deserve it. They immediately look at me and they say, hey, why you give me a $100 bill? Nobody's going to cash that. You couldn't give me 5 20s? So they look past the whole idea that somebody tried to help them or do something nice for them, and they automatically found fault with no matter what it was. So that's what I mean by eliminating the noise, right? So what did we do? We ended up working with these 94 folks. We let everyone come together, and you had to pick what you were going to, be passionate about and go from there. Um, we were able to go in and get 94 people to agree on the proper way to run a distribution center from a support perspective, what the process should be for trouble tickets across the entire enterprise, and that we needed to move towards standards across the enterprise in order for us to be able to sustain the business and, more importantly, sustain our own careers so that we could spend more time adding value to the business and less time worrying about things that didn't make us special and keeping the lights on. So it really came down to understanding that every one of those 94 people was at a different place when we were having those conversations. It took time. It took us 18 months to get through this. Now, when it was all said and done, we improved our customer service scores by 15%, and we eliminated $3 million in excessive spend annually from the environment. So was it worth it? Yeah. How many of those folks, even though I'm not working anymore, how many of those folks am I still engaged with? I'm going to say probably 80 of them. And why is that? It's because we built something together. It wasn't me, it wasn't you, it was us. So the other one that the kind of real world example here was, we had to, um, get a team together and determine, do we buy an application that kind of works or do we build our own? So again, we had to decide where everybody was in the process, where everybody was from an understanding of the end game, and work with those folks and those teams to allow them to express their opinions. A lot of good things came out of that. As a matter of fact, this guy ended up writing the majority of the process and procedures, and he'd never been engaged in it before, but it just clicked for him and it worked out. And the reason that happened is we engaged people, we worked with them. We weren't just caught up in, hey, guess what? Just do it. So it really worked out. That application's still in use, and again, it eliminated a lot of expense and it added a lot of value to the organization. So again, it comes down to taking that extra time, making sure you understand where people are in the process, where you are in the process, their comfort level versus your comfort level, being flexible to change, and understanding that everything is not always going to be, 100%, flowers and rainbows and everything. There's going to be some noise. You got to be able to eliminate it. So. All right. So, so you're not a manager. Why should you take it on, right? How does it help you at West? So I'll tell you, I wasn't a manager for the longest time, but I took on these extra responsibilities because I wanted to see the business succeed, and I got a lot of personal satisfaction out of doing that. It really did help. How did it help me at West? Working with teams, there were times I had classroom classes as well as online classes. And, I remember a time in the classroom where we all got assigned different kind of roles in our project management class. And I had to use situational leadership because I'd done project management for 10 years. There were people that were fresh out of high school or maybe had only had a couple years working that had no idea what was going on from a project management perspective. So you had to understand where they were in the subject matter versus where I was, and what could I do to help them understand what I already had been fortunate enough to learn. Um, it also helped me to make sure I was taking on what I was doing with my classwork correctly, right? Do I need to spend the time on this? Do I need to spend the time on something else? Going from there. Um, Situational leadership is probably the single biggest thing that has helped my career. It has really given me um, an opportunity to learn some incredible things about myself, incredible things about the people around me, and be able to participate in some really great work and make some really great connections with people that again, go on long after the job. And I would say I use situational leadership every day of my life. I think that there are times throughout the day where I have to make decisions, and they have to be based on, am I doing this, to help somebody? What does their level of engagement need to be? How much do I need to help them understand what's going on? And it really does um, uh, really impact, most aspects of what I do. So then the last thing here is I don't get it. Don't feel bad. I didn't get it either. I actually went to an actual training class early in my career on situational leadership, and I took all the study material and all the aids that they gave you and the books and let them collect dust for about a year and a half, and then I kept hearing it from other folks that I'd been working with, and I went and dusted it off and started reading through it and started doing some more work and started thinking about what I was doing, and then started changing the way I interacted with people and started, trying to be more, helpful and less of, kind of that IT guy that just comes in and, says move and gets you out of the way and gets it fixed and goes away, right? I started trying to engage people. Sometimes they don't care, and that's okay. And it just became a habit and a way of life. And it then led me to being more involved in business and less involved in IT. And it really worked out well. So if you don't get it, don't feel bad. Uh, it takes some time to understand it, and it takes some time to put it into practice. And the first couple stabs at it, um, they blew up in my face pretty good. But, you know, got through it, survived, it all worked out. All right, so let's see where we are here. I know we want to try and get some questions going. So now what? Again, think about your personal life, think about your work life, right? You've got things you can share with people. You've got the ability to reach out and to help somebody somehow. Um, and I'm going to go to this last line here and say, what if nobody notices? At the end of the day, you'll sleep like a baby because you know that you did everything you could to help people move forward, help the business move forward, and quite honestly, to help yourself move forward. And sometimes that's all you need. It's okay if you're the only person in the room that knows what happened. Eventually, like I said earlier, you'll find that it comes to light, and you'll get those things that you need to you know that you need to get in your life. You'll get that recognition. You'll get that raise. Things will happen. They will. All right. We've got some suggested reading here, and I believe this stuff will be available after the fact. So with that, um, we'll go with questions. I think we got about 15, 20 minutes that we can go with questions. I know I've said a lot, but if you have a question, if you want to go ahead and then type it in the chat area there, I'll do my best to answer them. So, Jason, that's a great question. You find little, right? So, I'll give you an example of that. So, your question on how do you stay excited about a project that you loathe? Um, Sometimes you just got to grunt it out. I'm not going to, try and sugarcoat that. You just do. But what I found is that there's some aspect, right? So if it was something that I had done 100 times before, and it was really just an incredible just drag on time and all these other things, I would find something else within that project to keep me excited. And what I mean by that is there somebody else on the team that maybe they are excited because this is their first crack at it, and they really don't understand just, what how really boring this is the 10th time you've gone through it. Um, is there a way that you can find some small little tidbit within the project that you can spend a little bit of time on yourself, um, outside of the project, right? So, for instance, we were doing a project where we were trying to audit some software across the entire enterprise. I mean, how boring can that really be, right? To try and audit software. Hey, how many copies of this do you have? Oh, that's great. You got 7. That's exciting. Well, what I started looking into was, what other ways are there to manage this? What other ways are there to make this better? We used to have these things we called better way teams. There's got to be a better way to do this so that it's not just sheer drudgery. Um, and, try and find those things to do it. But at the end of the day, you're always going to have one or two projects that you just gotta work through them. So hopefully that helped. All right, so if there's any other questions, hey, thanks, Jason. Yeah, kind of, the help others thing. It took me the longest time. If I were to be completely honest with everybody, and I'm going to be, I was quite the jerk early in my career. I really did not care about anybody else. I worried about myself. I was chasing the title. I was chasing the money. I would take on projects because I thought they would help me. I didn't take them on because I thought I could do a good job. Um, and what I found is that I was miserable, and I didn't understand why I was miserable. And then I found out through a very gracious person in my life. One of my early mentors basically called me aside and said, "Listen, um, you're not going to get anywhere when you worry about yourself because anybody can do that. It's easy. Take care of yourself. That's easy. When you start making sure in your career and in your life that you meet the responsibilities of all those around you that you can, and I'm not saying that I'm going to go out and be Mother Teresa and do all of these things. I wish I was 1/100th capable of taking on the world as Mother Teresa was. Um, but what I'm talking about is start doing the job for the job. Don't do the job for you. And when you start doing that, you'll find that your opportunities at that job become bigger and better. And with that responsibility usually comes a title change, usually comes a little bit more money. Um, you know, yeah, there's going to be those times where you're taken advantage of and you bust your butt and you get nothing out of it. But you know what? If you don't roll the dice, you're never going to win. So you can't be afraid to just jump out there and try and get stuff done. Um, you know, I've been fortunate that I've had some really incredible people in my life that have helped me and led me, so it works out. So that's a good question. How do you adjust to working with people at different places? So, one of the things that I'm guilty of is trying too hard, and that usually kind of bums people out a little bit, right? So what I found is that give it time. You have to be patient, right? Um, I had a job that so I left the food service company, and I had an interim job before I went to IBM. I didn't think it was going to be an interim job, quite honestly. I thought it was going to be my next career, and it took me a while to adapt because um, it's nothing that I had ever experienced before. Yeah, it was still information technology and it was still leadership, but it was a culture I'd never experienced before. So what I did is I listened a lot and I didn't speak so much. And as you're probably hearing tonight, that's hard for me to do, to be quiet. I like to talk. I like to have the conversation. So I listened, right? And when I listened, I started getting a little bit of a vibe on what was going on in the office and what people were thinking and what people were doing, right? And whenever anybody came over, I always tried to make sure that I listened to them and that I was engaging. Because sometimes, it's easy to, fiddle with your phone or stay focused on your computer or do whatever. I made sure that I was engaging to that person and that even if they were just coming over to tell me that they had the cutest dog in the world, that it was kind of the most important thing that I'd heard in the last 10 minutes. Now, that doesn't mean I gushed all over them. Oh my gosh, you have the most incredible dog. No, I listened to them because obviously that's important in their life, their pet, right? And an opportunity would present itself later where I could probably, have a conversation with them, say, hey, we were talking about your dog. What's going on there? Anything cool happen with the dog this weekend? Do anything crazy like that last story you told me? Well, now I've got a conversation point, right? Most times that person's now going to say to you, well, hey, what did you have going on? You got any pets at home? And now you're just finding something, and it may not be about the work, but something to have a conversation about, right? Again, you're still going to run into those $100 people where they just don't want to talk to you. They don't care. Some folks just want to come in, they want to do their job, they want to punch the clock, and they want to go home. They don't want they don't want to be your friend. They don't want to go to lunch with you. They don't even want to go to get coffee with you. They just want to come in and knock it out. And you'll be able to figure them out soon enough. So that's kind of what I did is just try to be calm. Um, Also watch the level of work that people are doing, right? If there's a lot of time wasted, the last thing you want to do is be the person that comes in and rats everybody out for wasting time. I went over to some of the folks that I thought were doing some, silly stuff, and I was like, hey, so what else do we have going on today? And just kind of talk to them, because that, would kind of say like, oh, maybe there is something else I should be doing, right? And then they'll start sharing with you a little bit about what they do, you know? You just got to be willing to put yourself out there a little bit. And quite honestly, some of it's going to stink because you're going to get smacked down. But don't take it personally. Just people are trying to learn you just like you're trying to learn them. So hopefully that gives you some insight. One thing I will tell you is that being a hiring manager, I was always of the mindset that I was more worried about somebody and how they would be as a person and what they were like as a person than entirely about their skill set. Because if somebody's got the right aptitude and the right attitude, I don't care what their skill set is. Because if they have those other two things going for them, I can teach them up to be the best whatever I want them to be, right? But if somebody comes in and they've already done it all, seen it all, it's going to be a tough person to bring into an organization. And then if they already have that, you never hear them say the word team or we during the interview. All they say is I did this and I did this and I did this. Well, they're not really probably being honest with themselves because quite honestly, nobody got anywhere entirely on their own. Um, Somebody had to help you somewhere. I mean, think about it. You didn't learn how to walk without your mom or your dad helping you, right? So it's the same thing in work. So I see we have another question coming in here. All right, so while we're waiting on that to come in, I encourage you to go out and look at some of these books, right? So anybody that's getting into a new management role, if you've had that, you've had that opportunity, um, I encourage you to go get a book called The First 90 Days, and it's referenced, in this presentation. It's really a great book in that, especially if you're a new manager, right? So here's what happens a lot of times, right? You go out and you get it really successful at something, right? So um, I had a guy that most incredible programmer I've ever worked with in my entire life. This guy was just unbelievable, right? And what he did was he got promoted, right? and he got made into a manager of all of the programmers. Well, he'd never managed people before. All he'd done is written code and managed machines. This guy struggled. He struggled big time because he didn't understand the dynamics of people and where they are. He made some very serious assumptions that, well, this is how I program. Everybody programs that way, right? No, that's not how it works, right? And then is the situation the same? Is it a team that's already highly functioning? Is it a team that, is just, they're just miserable and they need to be totally reworked? Or is it somewhere in the middle? So each of the situations requires a different skill set from the manager and a different way to motivate those folks to be able to get to where they need to be. So that's the first 90 days. It's a great book. Another good book to read is Good to Great, right? Good to Great is really incredible in that it will kind of give you an understanding from a leadership perspective. I believe I heard this recently in one of the political things going on around, and I don't know if you guys have the primaries going on out there, but in Virginia and in South Carolina and out here on the East Coast where all these primaries are going on, man, it is relentless. But anyway, so Good to Great really goes into how oftentimes, more often than not, the loudest person in the room is not necessarily the smartest person in the room. And you'll find that historically, the great business leaders and the great leaders in the world were not the boisterous, all about me kind of folks, right? And that really comes down to that same thing we were talking about earlier about serving others, you know. So Good to Great, although some of the companies in there are a little dated and maybe it didn't work out so well from a company perspective, the leaders were still pretty solid. Um, and the one at the top there, zap. That's how you determine, if you zap somebody, that's the equivalent of going and knocking them into a pool, right? As opposed to going in and actually working with them and getting them engaged and getting them going. All right, so did I miss any questions or are we good? So that's a great question. How do you keep from being a micromanager, right? So it's just like this. Let's think back to the pool story, right? I could have said, okay, Dan, take a step onto this step. Stop. All right. Now, with your right foot, I want you to put it out, and I want you to go down one step, and then I want you to stop. And then I want you to pick up your left foot, and I want you to move it. I want you to put it down, and I want you to put it there, and then I want you to stop. Now you're on the second step. Do you understand? We went from up on the top, now we went to the first step, now we're on the second step. Do you know what the second step is, Dan? And you know what I mean? So are you just preaching and preaching and preaching? You find ways, right? So between A and Z, there's got to be some part of the alphabet that that person knows, and you got to find a way to let them discover that on their own, right? So I don't need to tell Dan, put your right foot down on the first step and your left foot on the second step. All I need to do is say, hey, I need you to figure out the best way for you to get to right here. And if you're not sure about that, let me know and I'll come help you, right? So you give them that opportunity to go out there and kind of test the waters, so to speak, on their own. But they also have that life preserver hanging out where you've already said to them, it's cool. Just, do what you got to do, and I'm going to help you out. It's more again, it's we. We need to get down here to where your neck is above water, right? It's not you do this, you do this, you do this. I'm going to tell you this. And that's where it really differentiates. Anytime you can build a partnership or a coalition, um, you're going to have more success. All right, so I think we still have some more questions coming in. And again, I'm on LinkedIn, and I try my best to be responsive. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I get distracted. But if you go to LinkedIn, it's Daniel T. Corcoran. On LinkedIn, you can, if you want to go ahead and, um, send me an invite and just, put in there that, hey, I was on the webinar with West. Um, we can go ahead and become colleagues here from our time at West, and anytime I can share something or anytime you want to bounce an idea, I will do my best to help you out. Again, not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've been lucky enough to experience some stuff and you know go from there. Yeah, there is a book called Leader Without a Title, I believe is what it's called. Um, a friend of mine at work, actually, it was a guy that worked for me. Um, Gave me that book, and at first I was kind of like, well, wait a minute, what's this guy doing here, right? I didn't know whether to be offended or not. And then he told me why he gave it to him, and he said, I'm giving it to you because this is what the style of management that you're telling us that we need to do. It's basically it's this book. So it really comes down to how you can motivate and get people going and really get them engaged in their own success, which in turn can help you depending upon how involved they get, how engaged they get, especially if you get into in a role where you have people reporting to you. Um, it definitely will help to get them motivated. So I know we were supposed to go for an hour. I have more time. I don't know what the time limits are. So if we have one more question.
So I just want to give the one more question if we have one. If not, we will close this webinar. And thank you again, Dan, for sharing your time and also for everybody that want to join us online. We really appreciate that. We will send you the link, the recorded link, and also the PowerPoint to all of you, so at least you have something the one that you can refer to.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everybody for attending. It's my pleasure. I enjoy doing this kind of work and helping people learn the same way that somebody taught me.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Good night.